So welcome to another episode of Bringing the Law to Your Doorstep series. And today we're going to be discussing a very interesting subject. I mean, some might even call it controversial and sensitive. But yes, this is a very important discussion to us because it's something myself and my colleague here, Kojo, are very passionate about. And the topic we'll be discussing today would be asylum, basically seeking asylum in the UK. What asylum is like theoretically on paper and practically how the entire procedure is. So yeah, when we talk of asylum, what do we even mean by asylum? Okay, I'll try as much as possible to make it practical, like I always say. So when we talk about asylum, we're talking about a certain level of international protection that is afforded to people, usually fleeing persecution from other countries. Okay, so yes, for people who have a well-founded fear of persecution, asylum basically is a status that is granted to them. And once you are seeking asylum, you are an asylum seeker. But if the status is granted to you, then you become a refugee. So we have the asylum seeker making an initial application to be granted refugee status. And after the status is being granted to you, that is when you transition into becoming a refugee. So yes, basically, that is what the whole concept of asylum is like. But we are going to walk you through the theoretical aspect of it, of course, and the practical aspect of it, so that you understand how some of these processes work, especially within the United Kingdom. You understand the technicalities, the nuances, and sometimes the complexities of the whole procedure. So yeah, I'm going to allow my beloved brother Kojo to also weigh in on his understanding of asylum before I also continue from there.
Well, thank you again, Mano, for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Asylum, as the term goes, is not a foreign term. It's not Indian. It's been there for a while. If you follow the antiquity behind it, like my brother rightly said, asylum, normally for people who are normally fleeing their countries, primarily because of persecution primarily due to their race, their sexual orientation, at times perhaps due to the societal group they are in, their religious beliefs can also be a reason why, or their political opinions. And so if you're very political and there's a chance that the country you're in, due to how vocal you are, your life might be at risk, then, and the people that could potentially protect you are also going to turn blind, deaf ears. Your cries might fall on deaf ears, or they might not protect you in any capacity. Then it might be worth seeking solace or protection elsewhere.
Yeah.
And so asylum gives you the opportunity to flee from your country so that you're protected and your rights are adhered to.
Okay.
Essentially.
Yeah. So that's a wonderful introduction by my brother Kojo here. So when we talk about asylum, like you rightly mentioned, theoretically, we can't talk about asylum without mentioning the 1951 Refugee Convention, the almighty convention. So when you look at the Refugee Convention itself, it's been the subject of controversy amongst various academics. Okay. So theoretically speaking, the whole concept of the Refugee Convention is controversial. And in practice, the realization of refugee status, it can also be controversial. And we are not going to delve so much into the theoretical aspect because that is for the academics, okay? We want to talk about how to practically acquire refugee status in the United Kingdom. When you take a critical look at Article 1.2 of the Refugee Convention, the grounds under which any individual would be able to seek asylum are coherently listed under that particular section of the Refugee Convention. And like my colleague rightfully mentioned, there are 5 main grounds. Okay. So we have race, we have religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group or a political opinion. And if your circumstances do not align with these listed categories, forget it. You are not going to be granted asylum status. And I don't care the legal expertise of or how much of a legal titan any lawyer may be, try to tell you that yes, they can find a way around these particular fundamental provisions to seek asylum on your behalf. Once it doesn't fall within any of these categories, like I said, forget it. You are not going to, you are not going to be granted asylum status. Even those who fall within these categories, if I tell you in practice, the quantum of evidence that we need and the consistency when it comes to evidence you need to be able to successfully be granted refugee status in the UK. I mean, it's a Herculean process. I'm not even going to lie about it. So it's very important that when you try to seek asylum, your circumstances must fall within the ambit of Article 1.2 of the Refugee Convention. So asylum, the threshold for asylum, some practicing immigration lawyers will tell you that, it's not so high, but in practice, at least from what we've gathered and from the little that we've seen, the threshold is very intense. And when it comes to the United Kingdom, all the routes that lead to permanent settlement or indefinite leave to remain normally do come under serious scrutiny. The evidence that you need to supply and what the Home Office does to be able to make sure that they verify the evidence is very intense. Because once you are granted asylum status, you're granted refugee status, you have 5 years to be able to live in the United Kingdom. And after that, you can potentially apply for your indefinite leave to remain, then potentially apply for your British citizenship after that particular time. Okay.
After a year.
Yeah. So that's what my colleague just said. So even on paper, satisfying the requirement or any of these requirements can seem straightforward, but in practice, it demands a calculated effort, if I'm allowed to say that. You need to collate the correct evidence to be able to qualify in applying for refugee status under these listed or aforementioned factors. Now, some people come to us. We have wonderful clients. They come to us and they tell you their story. For some funny reason, people think that you can just lie away and just be granted refugee status. You can just say anything and be granted refugee status. Some clients come to you, you see that they will try and conjecture all kinds of stories just to be able to fall within the categories listed in Article 1.2. And we listen to them and we are like, no, this ain't gonna work. Okay. There are other clients that will also come and they tell you their story and you know that, this is really something.
Sure.
And once we push enough, you are going to be granted asylum status. So yes, on paper, that is the threshold that you need to go through. Now, practically, how does the procedure of asylum work in the United Kingdom? Now, to start with, there is what is known as the screening interview. Okay, that is at the preliminary stage. So it's the first interview that you usually go for. That is the screening interview. These are the normal procedural formalities you go through for verification checks. So your IDs, your passports, and all of that. But of late, I personally think there's been some sort of evolution because I think about last week, we had a wonderful client of ours, a Ukrainian national, who was seeking asylum in the UK. And I remember I was having a conversation with my boss and he said that he's never seen a preliminary interview as loaded as the one that came up when we were chasing the issue of this Ukrainian client of ours. The questions that she was asked and the evidence that she was, I wouldn't say evidence, but the answers she was asked to provide to the questions, it seemed more like the substantive interview. But usually at the preliminary interviews, just verification checks, just to check your background and a few other things. Then from the screening interview, you move to the substantive interview. This is the most important part. This is where your issue is going to be dissected. They want to understand the whole anatomy of your matter to be able to examine if you are qualified for refugee status in the United Kingdom. Now, the purpose of the screening interview is basically to ascertain if your matter is going to be tried by a third country unit, if it's going to be certified as a non-suspensive appeal, if it's going to be taken through the normal mainstream procedure. Okay. So when I talk about the third country unit, at times, let me make it practical. Okay. So I have opportunity to speak to a client, I think just last week, from one of the Southern American countries. Yeah, I think it was Brazil. Yeah, Brazil. And he cited his ongoing circumstances that in Brazil, there is this terrorist group in a certain part of Brazil, and that was where he lived. And as a result of that, he had to flee the country and he had to relocate to the UK, and he's seeking asylum on that particular ground. And I think initially he did it himself, and later on the application was refused. And when you look at the grounds for refusal by the Home Office, and this is where I think it's very important that we take note of this for potential asylum seekers. If the circumstances causing the well-founded fear is not a nationwide issue, it's not a nationwide problem, but it's relegated to a certain area, a segregated area, the chances that the asylum claim will work is very, very low. Like I was saying in the case of those wonderful clients of ours, the terrorism attacks, after we did our research online, was only limited to a certain area. Because in the eyes of the Home Office, they are going to ask you that if what you're talking about is happening within a particular section, why don't you consider the option of internal relocation? Why don't you relocate to another region within the same country? So unless it's a kind of nationwide persecution, and unless you can't afford yourself to the protection of the government or the ruling administration at the time, then you can potentially seek asylum. That's why I'm saying that this subject is very controversial. Even if we are to talk about the whole process of asylum for an entire year, we are not going to do enough justice to it. But I just want to hammer on the very practical point. You see a lot of things online and they make you seem as if asylum, they make you seem as if asylum is a straight route. You can easily gain asylum.
It's not a walk in the park.
That is it. That is it. All these things are taken into consideration. And again, with regard to the persecution has to be an ongoing phenomenon. So let me give a practical example. If I left my home country about 4 years ago and I went through other countries and I've finally arrived in the UK and I'm trying to seek asylum, and let's say the grounds for seeking asylum is religious persecution, my association with a particular religious group. Now, the question is, if we are to do our research on my home country, can it be established that the persecution will still be faced by myself? Should I return at the moment? So the fact that it was happening 4 years ago doesn't necessarily imply that currently it will still be happening.
Exactly.
But with regard to the threshold, the asylum threshold, it is mandatory that still the threat should be ongoing to be able to qualify for asylum. So there are a whole lot of procedural formalities that you need to go through to be able to successfully apply for asylum. And there are also cases where some of our clients have dealt with the application and their claim have been rendered as clearly unfounded. Now, in the UK, when your claim for asylum is rendered as unfounded, it simply implies that you don't have the right of appeal, especially with regard to the first year tribunal. Okay, so the only option within the UK will possibly be judicial review, and with judicial review, we are not looking at the merits of the case. We are looking at if the decision made by the Home Office was rational, was lawful, or was procedurally unfair. Okay, so yes, there are options of appeal probably outside the United Kingdom, but within the United Kingdom, there is no right of appeal. So these are some of the technicalities that people need to know and people need to appreciate. I think briefly, this is what I'd like to say about the whole concept of asylum. And you don't actually have to even walk to us. I mean, I would advise anybody trying to seek asylum in the United Kingdom to seek legal expertise.
Exactly.
Okay, before you start the entire process. You don't wait till the 11th hour before you seek to engage the legal experts to deal with your matter.
Exactly.
So on this note, I would also, I don't know if my colleague Kojo would want to add anything.
I mean, you said everything. If you don't seek our services, information is free, it's really accessible. You can just go to the government website. There's a plethora of information on there. You can read and be informed, and that will guide you to know how to go about things. I just want to reiterate on a couple of things. He's done a perfect job at painting a perfect picture for anyone seeking to explore asylum, or for anyone who knows someone who might be interested, or just for medicative purposes. So with asylum, it's important that you realize that if for whatever reason you are fleeing, with Home Office, when you're running through the substantive interview, they pay attention to, they ask you a series of questions from your background to why you've left and why you went through certain routes. It's important that you understand that just because there's conflict in your country, or just because you've been persecuted, does not necessarily mean that by moving to UK, you'll be given automatic asylum. They first understand that the first point of contact. I'll give an example. For those of you that were following UK immigration news, you realize at the time that Sunak was president, or was prime minister of the United Kingdom, that there were plans to move illegal migrants to a certain country. And the person I'm talking about happens to come from that country, have sought asylum from that country, and was looking to claim asylum in the UK. That will not work. Because in the country that you first sought asylum, as long as it's peaceful, as long as they don't persecute you, then there's no grounds for you to now move to another country and say you claim asylum. When you've already claimed asylum, you already have a passport. So these are some of the things that people might be oblivious of, and might make them find themselves in complex situations.
I'd like to also add something to what my colleague said. When it comes to the screening interview, someone might ask how long does the entire procedure take? So for straightforward applications, it takes a period of 6 months. And for complex applications, or applications that are not straightforward, it's about 12 months. At least that is the standardized time. But when it comes to the entire appeal process, I don't even want to go there. But an application can be classified as complex. For instance, if the asylum seeker is pregnant and has mental issues of some sort, or if the asylum seeker, of course, is awaiting medical legal reports. Yes, there are reports known as medical legal reports that help in seeking for asylum. And at times the Home Office might also be awaiting certain correspondences on the part of the asylum seeker as well. So yes, that is roughly the time frame when it comes to seeking asylum.
Wonderful contribution. And for those of you who think that asylum is the only route that you can explore, even though today the whole conversation has been around asylum, there's also what we call humanitarian protection. And so some people might misconstrue that for asylum it's not necessarily the same case. If there's armed conflict, like what happened in Ukraine, and Syria and other places, you can claim humanitarian protection. There are stringent regulations around it, but you can claim that as well.
We will tackle that some other time.
For those that are interested, or those that have rushed into the comment section, let us know if you've heard it before, if it's something that you want us to talk about, and we're sure to do that. And it's important that you realize that it's restricted to those that are in the UK. It doesn't apply if you're overseas. You have to be in the UK. And so these are other ways that can also lead to settlement. And so a lot of people might be oblivious to that fact. So if you don't qualify for asylum while here or by the books, there are legal means to retain or stay in the UK. You just need to read wide or seek legal advice, and we'll be sure to help you. Regarding the substantive interview, it's important to know that there are volumes of evidence that you submit. And so it's important that often says you might not have it, but if you have footages, you've got documentary videos, you've got blogs, that can basically help substantiate your claim. You've got family witness statements, all these things can help drive your point or help affirm the fact that you are someone seeking asylum. So with asylum, you might be surprised that in as much as you might be fleeing your country for whatever reasons, there are some people that automatically will not qualify. So for instance, if you are a war criminal, for instance, if you're a terrorist, there are grounds or evidence to suggest this, that you will not be allowed into the country. Obviously, they'll do their research and find out. But one that is substantiated, you will not be allowed to seek asylum or become a refugee in that country. So that I believe that's something that's worth knowing as well.
Okay. So I'd like to thank my wonderful colleague Kojo very much. In fact, he's been a wonderful blessing on these episodes because I believe he complements me perfectly. on some of these issues. So yeah, we've just covered briefly what asylum is. We are looking at covering issues relating to human rights, modern slavery, and most of these aspects of the law. Okay, we can't talk about everything here, but we just want to thank you, our wonderful viewers, for also giving us the platform to share some of these positions in the law with you. And yes, we look to bring you nothing but the best of the information. And yeah, I'd just like to thank each and everyone. Yeah. So till we meet the next time, cheers and have a lovely time. Yeah, cheers.
Bye.